So today I wanted to give you guys some insight into what my personal healing journey has been for myself with my GI health. So when I first ran my GI map, I knew that there would probably be something there for me to work on. I knew that I wasn't feeling 100%. I suffered from a lot of chronic fatigue, low energy levels. I would get frequent migraines, and I suffered from a lot of neck and shoulder pain that would lead to these chronic migraines. So I knew that there would be most likely something going on when I got the results of my GI map. And I didn't expect the results to be quite as bad as I thought they would be. And on one hand, the information was a little overwhelming. But on the other hand, I kind of felt this sense of relief because I felt like if only I had known this sooner, I may have been able to understand what I was going through. I may have been able to forgive myself for certain things that I was judging myself for, like being more tired than other people, always feeling like this huge energy crash in the afternoon. When I was in college in my early 20s, I just couldn't make it through a full day without taking a 2-hour nap. It was very difficult for me to wake up in the morning. It was very difficult for me to stay awake and alert through a long 2-hour class. And I always was very critical of myself. I always felt that there must be something wrong with me. I'm not as tough as other people. Other people who wake up early, they just have a stronger fortitude of spirit. They're better than me somehow. So getting these results really provided me with a sense of relief that here was something that I could work on. And we, in this society, we like to pinpoint one thing and say, well, this is the diagnosis. And so this is the thing that you've been dealing with. Just treat this one thing and you'll be better. But there's really so much more to it. There are always more layers. And especially when it comes to your physical health, and especially when it comes to your gut health, there are always emotional layers involved. When we are experiencing stress throughout our lives, it influences our gut in so many ways. And that stress can really come from anything from, emotional stress that you experience in your childhood. So we're talking about childhood trauma here. This can be a really early place for your gut health issues to develop. And once they've sort of taken root and there's an imbalance that has been seated in the gut, it becomes more easy for other infections to occur throughout your life, and it becomes sort of a snowball effect. There are so many things in childhood that can occur beyond just emotions, but things that we typically consume in early childhood, anything from school lunches to baby formula, that can lead to the development of chronic gut issues later on in life. And I'll have plenty of time to explore some of those topics in a later newsletter. But today, I know you are dying to know what is in my gut, and I am so excited to share that with you. So, the brief rundown of the main inflammatory markers that I found in my gut. Before I went to run this test, my mother had been going through the same program, and she had run a test on herself, and she kept saying to me, I think you have a parasite. I bet you have a parasite. And I was very much in denial for there to be any potential that I could have a parasite. I kept insisting that was very unlikely that I had a parasite, and I just didn't want to accept that that was a possibility. So when I got my results, I did have a parasite, and it was a parasite that stemmed from something called pinworm. So if you've ever had pinworm as a child, it's possible that you could have developed this other parasite. And I had pinworm when I was 4 years old a couple of times. Pinworm is very common. Children who are outside playing in the backyard, getting dirt under their fingernails and then putting their hands in their mouth. It's very easy to get. It's very easy to treat. So looking at this parasite and considering the fact that I had pinworm at such a young age really opened my eyes to the fact that this parasite could have been living in my system since I was 4 years old. And I did have a lot of emotional problems as a child. I was very prone to tantrums. My emotional experience was always very, very intense, and that didn't get any easier when I became a teenager. And then I dealt with a lot of anxiety, depression, and addictive tendencies in my early adulthood. So in some ways, some of this may have stemmed from the development of this parasite when I was very young. And this parasite in particular is a protozoan parasite. So it's different from, say, like a worm or a tapeworm. It's one of the most ancient life forms on this planet, the protozoa. And it's not really looked upon by the medical community as an emergency. It's not something that they would necessarily treat right away with antibiotics or anything like that. It's not really seen as pathogenic in their eyes. However, it does release a lot of toxins which can further dysbiosis in the gut. And for some reason, the modern medical community hasn't fully embraced the full scope of gut health, in the sense that they sort of overlook the holistic aspect of it. They overlook how one little inflammatory situation in the gut can lead to more dysbiosis, which is imbalance of good to bad bacteria, and how ultimately this can lead to chronic inflammation in the gut, which then leads to chronic inflammation in the body, and can then lend itself towards the development of different genetically predisposed diseases that you have in your family. So while it's not viewed as pathogenic, this particular protozoan parasite that I have in my body has been excreting toxins for potentially since I was 4 years old. And when the toxins are excreted, there are so many ways that this can influence impact your emotional experience. When toxins are excreted and there's a big inflammatory reaction, hormones are released, stress hormones, cortisol is released, can put you into a chronic state of fight or flight where your hormones are going up and down and your emotions are therefore going up and down. So you can see very quickly how having a parasite can really affect your emotional experience in life. And so it can then affect how you're living your life, how you're experiencing your life. But that was not all that I found in my GI map. So far from it, the protozoan parasite was just one little part. And another thing that I found in the GI map was that I had very high levels of H. pylori. You may have heard of H. pylori. This is considered something that they would want to treat in the medical community. And it's actually very, very common. It's often found in contaminated well water, and it can be passed from partner to partner, so you can be exchanging it with your spouse. It is a pathogenic bacteria, and it's sort of like a spiral shape, and it releases a lot of inflammation in the body. And it in very, very small quantities, it can be part of a healthy gut ecosystem, but when it's overgrown, it's very problematic. So I have a lot of H. pylori, and so that's something I will be dealing with and am currently detoxing. And I will tell you more about how I detox these later on in the video, so stick around. So far I had a parasite and I had H. pylori. And the other major problem that I had in my GI map that immediately needed to be addressed is that I had overgrowths of a handful of good bacteria. So good bacteria, when it is in too high of a quantity, if it's too overgrown, can be just as inflammatory, just as problematic as bad bacteria. And some of the good bacteria that I had in too high of quantities were actually autoimmune triggers. So different bacteria in the gut are associated with different things. Some of them are associated with the development of autoimmune diseases. Some of them are associated with rheumatoid arthritis. Some are associated with psoriasis. So there's really a deep connection here between the gut microbiome and what we experience as our chronic symptoms in life and what we develop down the line. So experiencing a lot of brain fog and a lot of fatigue in my life, I was definitely questioning if I was experiencing any level of autoimmunity, and it's definitely possible. So to clear up this overgrowth of good bacteria is absolutely essential. And I was what would be considered borderline SIBO. SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is an overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine. And this is very, very common if you're experiencing acid reflux. This is very likely one of the root causes behind that symptom. So I had borderline SIBO, meaning that if I had just one more good bacteria overgrown, I would have been considered SIBO. But I had just under the amount that would be considered SIBO. So it gave me a lot of stuff to work on. Yes, it was overwhelming. Yes, it was daunting. And I was a little shocked because I did consider myself somebody who ate well and was health conscious. I was always working on my health, but major chronic stress, major anxiety, major mood swings have always been a huge part of my life. And on one hand, they contribute to the development of dysbiosis, and on the other hand, this dysbiosis, including all of these bacteria, pathogenic bacteria and parasites releasing toxins into my bloodstream, causing inflammation in my gut, is going to be triggering these mood swings, is going to be dysregulating my hormones. So it's you can really see how important it is to get a look at what's in your GI map, because it will most likely shock you. Parasites are often seen as something that you only get when you're traveling to a foreign country. But truly, they are something that most of us are walking around with and have no idea. Statistically, not many people have access to GI map testing to see what's in their gut because it is not covered by health insurance. It's very hard to find a doctor who will recommend it or who will even run it upon request, even if you're willing to pay for it. So people don't really have access to it. So when we're looking at the statistics of people who have run a GI map, it's not very many people. And within that, we're still seeing a high percentage of people who are walking around with some kind of parasite. And that is something that can absolutely be dealt with. I'm going to show you the 3 examples of supplements that I use to treat a parasite detox, and why it's so important to have these 3 different kinds of supplements that create sort of a powerful trifecta to eliminate what's in the gut there. But before I do that, I wanted to just give you a look at what the results of a GI map actually look like on paper so that you can sort of get an idea of what it might look like if you run one for yourself. So hang tight while I pull that up. Okay, so this is the lab where I run my GI maps. It's called Diagnostic Solutions. Right up front, they start with any pathogenic bacteria or pathogenic parasites. And as you can see, I didn't come up as positive for any of these pathogenic bacteria, but they include things like E. coli, Salmonella, C. difficile. And here they show you 3 parasitic pathogens. If you test positive for something like this, a doctor would probably recommend that you go on an antibiotic, or at least do some form of treatment. There are ways to treat them herbally if you decide to go a different route, but I did not test positive for any of these. So here you can see where I tested positive for a H. pylori. And if you look here, this is where you see I have 4.7 e to the second power, which means that there are, when you're looking at the gut, you're looking and you're dealing with such large quantities because there are billions and trillions of these bacteria. If you want to actually count out every single one, they live in colonies that are millions, billions, and trillions. So I did test positive for H. pylori, and then here you can see my normal bacterial flora, which is considered your good bacteria. You want to have bacteria here, and if you're missing any in particular, then you're going to want to replace that with probiotic. But in my case, a probiotic would cause me more problems and more pain because I already have so much more of the good bacteria, and I definitely don't want to be adding to that. So I was high in these 3 strains, Bacteroides fragilis, Enterobacter, Akkermansia, and so these are the 2 families, the Bacteroides and the Firmicutes phylum, and you can see here that I'm high in both categories. So I really want to take that down a notch. Then looking here, this is opportunistic bacteria. So this is where we have some problematic bacteria that like to move in when they see an opportunity. And I had 2 strains. I have Bacillus and I have Streptococcus. and I was very prone to developing strep when I was a teenager. It started very severely. Once or twice a year, I would get really, really sick, and it kept going all through college into my early 20s. And it wasn't until I started to detox the strep virus from my body, because when you have a virus like this and then you get better, we think, oh, it's over. But in reality, that virus is just lying dormant now in our system. And so it's so important to continue to detox and to really bring balance to the gut microbiome. Here we have some autoimmune triggers. I have one here, and I have one here, and one here. So that's 3 overgrowths of bacteria that have potential autoimmune triggers. So that's definitely something to work on. And then taking a look here in the parasites in the protozoa section, this one right here, Dientomoeba fragilis, is the parasite that is often a co-infection of pinworm. So that's the parasite that I have been dealing with potentially since I was a little kid. And then other than that, you can see it tests for a lot of different parasites, but we also get to look at some intestinal health markers. So this is my elastase 1, which is a pancreatic enzyme. I'm very low, which it indicates that my pancreas is not functioning optimally. This is my anti-gliadin IgA. So that is my reaction to wheat that was quite high. So, a lot of us are reactive to wheat. Even if you're not diagnosed with celiac or anything like that, there's non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And just generally, wheat is sort of a Frankenstein of what it formerly was before it was genetically changed so much, so many times. And it's really not good for our intestines or our bodies or inflammation altogether. So yeah, that's what a GI map looks like when you get the results. I hope that was helpful, and I hope that it has inspired you somewhat to run your own GI map and find out what's going on in your gut microbiome. I personally highly recommend that anybody, if you're questioning whether or not there is something that you need to address in your body, I definitely recommend functional lab testing, because I spent so many years trying to figure out what was wrong, experimenting with different supplements, different exercise techniques, all different healing modalities. And while some of them did help, I was still struggling immensely. And when I ran the functional lab work, I just felt like I finally had something really concrete to sink my teeth into, something that I could really use to my advantage. And the GI map is one of the main tests that I run in the Revitalize program, along with a Dutch hormone test, which gives you the full assessment of your hormones, your sex hormones, your stress hormones, all the hormone metabolites, so you can really see where the breakdown is occurring. It also includes organic acid testing, which is B12, B6, all kinds of different organic acids that can indicate different nutrient deficiencies and different metabolism problems within the body. And then aside from the GI map and the Dutch hormone test, I do a mucosal barrier assessment, which gives me just a little more information about what's going on in the mucosal barrier of your gut. And I also run a LEAP MRT food sensitivity test, which tests for multiple inflammatory markers, not just one, to a whole long list, almost 200 foods and chemicals, and it gives you a good idea of what foods your immune system is now uniquely responding to in a disproportionate way. And that can be so empowering, because it's very, very difficult to figure out on your own, just by tracking your diet and your symptoms, what specifically is causing reactions when we eat so many different foods every day, and a reaction can occur up to a week later. It makes it very difficult to figure out. So this Revitalize program really just eliminates all guesswork. It gives you a bunch of concrete information, and it also gives you in-depth access to working one-on-one with me in creating your healing plan and sort of course correcting along the way, because as the microflora in your gut begins to change and shift, you want to make sure that you're not getting rid of too much bacteria, or you're not adding too much good bacteria. And there can also be a lot of questions that come up and symptoms that you have questions about. And there's a lot of deeper work to be done that is really only something that you can access through one-on-one coaching. So the Revitalize program is a really in-depth, really immersive, interactive experience where you're getting the highest standard of care when it comes to holistic healing, because you're getting really great science-based approach, but you're also getting the one-to-one coaching experience, so you're not just left with a bunch of information that you don't know how to handle and you don't know how to work with. So that was what my first GI map looks like. And before I go, I wanted to tell you quickly about the supplements that you need to use together as a unit to treat a parasitic infection or a bacterial overgrowth. you're going to want to disrupt your biofilms. Biofilms are what grow over bacterial colonies, what grow over parasitic colonies in your gut to sort of protect them from being eliminated or detoxed. So the one I like to use is the Biocidin Remove. It supports microbial balance and disrupts biofilms. Some of the ingredients here, grapeseed extract, golden seal, garlic is one of the main biofilm disruptors there, white willow bark, milk thistle seed, echinacea, black walnut hull. This is very anti-parasitic. So it's really a nice blend of natural herbal supplements that will disrupt the biofilms, because without disrupting the biofilms, you can't detox what's underneath them. And then it's very important to take something that will help bind to the toxins that you are detoxing, will help bind to the bacteria and the parasites that have been released from the biofilms, so that you can eliminate them every time you go to the bathroom, because otherwise, what good is it if you've disrupted the biofilms and you've paralyzed the parasites, but they're just sitting there in your colon because it's not binding and coming out? So I like to use this as another Biocidin product. It is called GI Detox. It is a zeolite, charcoal, and herbal formula. Zeolite and charcoal are very potent binders. And that really helps with symptom management, because when they start to die off, sometimes they release a lot of toxins. So yes, so the GI detox, very important. And I don't have a bottle here, but depending on what you're treating, whether it's H. pylori or bacterial overgrowth or parasites, you're going to want to get a targeted herbal supplement. And there are some that I really like. The Raintree Forest company makes some really good anti-parasitics. Biomatrix is a brand that makes some really good anti-parasitics. They make antifungals, anti-parasitics. So, yep, that's the scoop. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much. I hope that this has been informative, inspirational, and if you have any further questions about GI map testing, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to hear from you.